The battle had moved beyond the asteroid field into open space. For the first time in over a century of conquest, a Vorthak fleet found itself in a prolonged engagement with an enemy that refused to be defeated. Status report. Captain So-young called out as the Indomitable completed another evasive maneuver. Hull integrity at 73%, reported Chief Engineer Jin Woo. We've taken damage to sections 4 through 7, but all major systems are operational. Ammunition status? Weapons Officer Min Ho checked his display. 4 railgun slugs remaining. Energy weapons at 40% charge, so... Young nodded grimly. They were running out of options, but they had also proven something important. The Vorthak were not unstoppable. Captain, Science Officer Dong Hyun spoke up from his station. I've been analyzing the wreckage from the bioships we destroyed. I think I understand how their adaptation process works. Explain. The bioships are essentially giant organisms with distributed nervous systems. When they encounter a new threat, every cell in their body receives information about that threat through their neural network. Then they literally evolve in real time to counter it. That's what we already knew, said Tactical Officer Hye Jin. Yes, but here's what we didn't know, Dong Hyun continued. The adaptation process is incredibly fast, but it's also very specific. When they adapt to counter plasma weapons, they become more vulnerable to kinetic attacks. When they develop armor against projectiles, energy weapons become more effective. Medical Officer Seok Jin looked up from his patient. Like an immune system that overreacts? Exactly. And there's something else. The adaptations are shared across the entire fleet through some kind of organic communication network. When one ship learns to resist a weapon, they all do. That explains why our tactics stopped working so quickly, So-young said. But it also gives us an opportunity, Dong Hyun said. If we could disrupt that communication network. Communications Officer Yoon-ji turned from her station. Captain, I've been monitoring their transmissions. The bioships communicate using organic neural pulses. It's like they're all connected to one giant brain. Can you jam it? Maybe. But I'd need to get close to one of their ships to analyze the frequency. So-young looked at the tactical display. The main Vorthak fleet was approaching, led by Hwan's massive flagship. 37 bioships, each one larger and more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. Fighter Squadron Leader Ji-won. Report to the bridge, So-young announced over the comm. A few minutes later, a young pilot entered the bridge. Ji-won had been the leader of the Indomitable small fighter squadron before most of the fighters had been destroyed in the earlier fighting. Captain, I have 2 fighters left, both barely operational. I need you to do something that sounds insane, So-young said. I need you to get close enough to one of those bioships for Yoon-ji to analyze their communication network. Ji-won's eyes widened. How close, Captain? Close enough to almost touch it. That is insane, Ji-won agreed. When do we launch? 20 minutes later, the 2 remaining human fighters streaked toward the approaching Vorthak fleet. They were tiny compared to the bioships, like insects flying toward a pack of whales. On the Vorthak flagship, Hwan watched the approaching fighters with interest. 2 small craft approaching, War Prime. Should we destroy them? No, Hwan said thoughtfully. Let them come. I want to see what the humans are planning now. The fighters danced around the bioships, too small and fast to be easily targeted. One of them flew so close to a Vorthak vessel that it almost scraped the living hull. Got it, Unji announced on the Indomitable's bridge. I'm reading their neural network frequency. It's incredibly complex. Like monitoring the thoughts of an entire civilization. Can you disrupt it? I think so. But it will take all our remaining power. And Captain, once I do this, we won't have enough energy left for weapons. So-young looked around the bridge at her exhausted crew. They had been fighting for 10 hours straight. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and almost out of ammunition. Do it, she said. The Indomitable turned all its remaining power toward its communication array. A powerful signal burst toward the Vorthak fleet, carefully tuned to interfere with the bioship's neural network. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the Vorthak fleet, bioships suddenly stopped coordinating their movements. Ships that had been sharing information about human weapons suddenly found themselves isolated, each one having to relearn how to counter human attacks. Direct hit on Bioship 7, Minho reported as the Indomitable fired one of its last railgun slugs. It's not adapting. The ship doesn't seem to know how to counter kinetic weapons. They've lost their shared memory, Dong-hyun realized. Each ship has to learn independently now. But the victory was short-lived. On the Vorthak flagship, Hwan quickly understood what had happened. The humans have disrupted our neural network, he announced to his sub-commanders. Switch to individual adaptation protocols. Each ship will have to learn on its own. That will make us less efficient, War Prime. But it will also make us more unpredictable, Hwan replied. If each ship adapts differently, the humans will not be able to predict our responses. What followed was the strangest battle in either species' history. Bioships began adapting in different ways to the same threats. Some developed thick armor against kinetic weapons. Others became more maneuverable to avoid them. Still others tried to adapt their own weapons to be more effective against human technology. The result was chaos, but it was chaos that favored the larger force. Captain, Jinwoo called out, we're down to our last railgun slug. Energy weapons are at 15%. And we're facing 34 bioships that are now adapting individually, Hyojin added. We can't predict what any of them will do next. So Young realized they had reached the end. They had fought longer and more successfully than any species in Vorthak history, but they were still just one ship against an entire fleet. All hands, she announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for ramming speed, Captain, Jinwoo asked. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as possible. Set the reactor to overload. We'll ram the flagship and detonate. Wait, Marine Sergeant Youngsu's voice came over the comm. Captain, I have an idea. It's crazy, but everything we've done today has been crazy. I'm listening, Sergeant. The bioships adapt to our weapons, right? But what if we made them adapt to something that would destroy them? Explain. The reactor overload you're planning. What if instead of just using it as an explosion, we made it look like a new type of weapon? Something they would try to adapt to? Science Officer Dong-hyun's eyes widened. If they tried to adapt to absorb reactor energy, they would essentially try to swallow a star, Seok-jin finished. So-young looked around the bridge. Her crew was battered, exhausted, and facing impossible odds. But they were still thinking, still coming up with new ideas. Jinwoo, can you modify the reactor overload to look like a controlled energy weapon? Yes, Captain. I can make it appear to be a new type of energy beam. The bioship's sensors would read it as a weapon they could potentially adapt to and absorb. Do it. As the Indomitable prepared for its final gambit, Hwan watched from his flagship with a mixture of admiration and sadness. The humans had shown him something he had never expected to see, a species that could match Vorthak adaptability, not through biological evolution, but through pure creativity and stubbornness. War Prime, his tactical officer reported. The human ship is approaching on a collision course. They appear to be preparing some kind of final weapon. Hwan nodded. They will not surrender. Even facing certain death, they continue to fight. He paused, studying the tactical display. I think I am beginning to understand why they might be the key to our own survival. The Indomitable streaked toward the Vorthak flagship, its modified reactor building toward overload. Behind it, the last message from Captain So-young was broadcast to the colony on New Busan. Tell Earth that humans don't give up. Tell them that even the most advanced enemy can be stopped if you're willing to think differently. And tell them that the Vorthak are not evil. They're running from something worse. When the time comes, maybe we can help each other. The final battle was about to begin. The running battle through the asteroid field had been going on for 6 hours. Both sides had lost ships, but the Indomitable was running low on ammunition while the Vorthak seemed to have endless numbers. Captain, Chief Engineer Jinwoo called from his station. I've been studying the wreckage of the bioships we destroyed. I think I understand something important. So-young wiped sweat from her forehead. The constant maneuvering and fighting was taking its toll on everyone. Talk to me, Jinwoo. The bioships adapt to energy-based attacks by changing their cellular structure. But they can't adapt to simple kinetic weapons because there's nothing to learn from. It's just mass and velocity. We already knew that, said Weapons Officer Minho. That's why the railguns work. But here's the thing, Jinwoo continued. They've never encountered a species that uses both advanced and primitive weapons together. Every other race they've fought has specialized in one type of technology. Medical Officer Seok-jin looked up from treating wounded crew members. You're saying they don't know how to handle our mixed approach? Exactly. When they adapt to our energy weapons, they become vulnerable to kinetics, When they try to armor against kinetics, energy weapons work again, but they can't do both at the same time. Captain So-young felt a spark of hope. How many railgun slugs do we have left? 12, Minho reported grimly. And energy weapons? About 60% charge remaining. So-young looked at the tactical display. 8 bioships were still pursuing them through the asteroid field, and the main Vorthak fleet was slowly catching up. Nari, she said to the Caltherian refugee, you said your people fought for 6 hours before the bioships adapted completely. How long have we been fighting? 6 hours and 17 minutes, Nari replied. Her face was pale. Captain, no species has ever lasted this long against a Vorthak adaptation cycle. Then we're in uncharted territory, So-young said. Communications, open a channel to the entire ship. Yunji nodded. You're on, Captain. All hands, this is Captain So-young. We are facing an enemy that has conquered nearly 100 worlds. They've never been stopped because they learn from every attack and become immune to it. But they've never fought humans before. She paused, looking around the bridge at her tired but determined crew. What makes humans different is that we don't just use one type of weapon or one type of strategy. We use everything. Ancient weapons next to modern ones. Tactics from different cultures and different times. We adapt not just our technology but our entire way of thinking. She could see her crew straightening up, understanding what she was saying. The enemy expects us to follow patterns, to be logical and efficient. But humans have never been just logical. We're creative, stubborn, and sometimes completely insane. Use that. If your weapon stops working, find a different weapon. If your tactic fails, try something that makes no sense. Keep them guessing. Aye, Captain, came the response from throughout the ship. On the Vorthak flagship, Juan was becoming increasingly frustrated. His bioships had adapted to human energy weapons 4 times, only to have the humans switch to kinetic attacks. When his ships developed armor against the kinetic weapons, the humans would switch back to energy, but using completely different frequencies. War Prime, his science officer reported. Our adaptive cycles are becoming confused. The humans are not following any recognizable pattern. What do you mean? In our previous conquests, each species had a preferred method of warfare. The Caltherians used plasma exclusively. The Zentak relied on gravity weapons. The Horthak used pure energy. We could predict their next move based on their previous actions. Juan studied the tactical readout. And the humans? They have no pattern, War Prime. They use ancient kinetic weapons alongside advanced energy systems. They employ hit-and-run tactics, then suddenly turn to fight directly. They even use the asteroids as weapons, pushing them into our ship's paths. As if to prove the point, one of Juan's pursuing ships suddenly found itself in the path of a large asteroid that had been deliberately knocked loose by a human mining charge. The bioship's adaptive armor was useless against several million tons of rock. They are using mining equipment as weapons? Juan asked. Yes, War Prime. Explosive charges meant for breaking up asteroids, industrial cutting lasers, even construction equipment. Their ship appears to be carrying tools from a dozen different human industries. Juan realized he was dealing with something completely new. Every other species the Vorthak had encountered was civilized, organized, predictable. Their military followed doctrine, used standardized equipment, and fought in recognizable patterns. But humans seemed to treat warfare like improvisation. War Prime, another officer reported. The human ship is heading for a dense cluster of metallic asteroids. Our sensors will be limited in that area. Follow them, Juan ordered. I want to see what they do next. In the metallic asteroid cluster, the Indomitable played a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the Vorthak ships. The high metal content of the asteroids interfered with sensors on both sides, making it impossible to track each other at long range. Contact, announced sensor operator Kyung-soo. Bioship approaching from bearing 07 Mark II. Distance? Asked So-young. 500 meters and closing. The range was almost point-blank for space combat. Any weapon would be effective at that distance. Jinwoo, what's the most ridiculous weapon we have on board? So-young asked. The engineer looked puzzled. Ridiculous, Captain. Something the Vorthak would never expect. Something that makes no sense. Jinwoo thought for a moment. Well, we do have the emergency hull repair system. It uses a kind of spray foam that hardens instantly when exposed to vacuum. It's meant for sealing hull breaches, but it could block their weapons ports, So-young finished. Do it. The Indomitable suddenly appeared from behind an asteroid, flying directly at the surprised bioship. Instead of firing weapons, it sprayed construction foam across the bioship's hull, covering its weapon ports and sensor arrays. The bioship tried to fire, but its weapons were blocked. It tried to clear the foam, but the substance was designed to bond permanently with whatever it touched. "Now hit it with everything we have," So Young ordered. The disabled bioship died under a barrage of railgun slugs and energy weapons. "I've never seen anything like that," Nari said, amazement in her voice. "You used a repair tool as a weapon." "Humans have been doing that for thousands of years," So Young replied. "We've fought wars with farm tools, cooking ingredients, and office supplies. When you're creative enough, anything can be a weapon." The battle continued for another hour, with the Indomitable using increasingly unconventional tactics. They used mining charges to create artificial meteor showers. They employed industrial lasers meant for cutting metal to slice through bioship hulls. They even used the ship's garbage disposal system to fire debris at enemy vessels. Each tactic worked once, before the bioships adapted to it. But the humans always had something new to try. Finally, as they emerged from the asteroid field, So Young realized they had accomplished something impossible. They had fought the Vorthak to a standstill. "Captain," Yunji reported, "I'm receiving another transmission from the enemy flagship." Juan appeared on screen again, but this time he looked different. Less confident, more thoughtful. "Captain So Young," he said, "you have done something no species has accomplished in over a century. You have fought my fleet for 8 hours without being completely adapted to." "Is that a compliment or a threat?" So Young asked. "It is recognition," Juan replied slowly. "You humans do not fight like any species we have encountered. You do not follow patterns. You do not specialize. You use everything. That's what humans do," So Young said. "We adapt." "Yes," Juan said, and there was something like respect in his voice. "You adapt. But not like my bioships adapt. They change their structure to counter specific threats. You change your entire approach to warfare. So what happens now?" So Young asked. Juan was quiet for a long moment. "Now, Captain, you have shown me that there are ways of fighting I never imagined. And that changes everything." The transmission ended, leaving So Young and her crew to wonder what the Vorthak War Prime meant by those words. The death screams of 3 bioships echoed through the Vorthak fleet's organic communication network. Juan felt each death like a physical blow. In over 100 conquered worlds, he had never lost scouts to a first attack. The bioships were supposed to take damage, learn, and adapt. They were not supposed to die. "War Prime," his sub-commander's voice was shaky. "The remaining scouts are analyzing the attack. The humans used kinetic projectiles, simple metal moving at high speed." Juan studied the tactical display. The human ship that had destroyed his scouts was now moving away from the colony, heading toward the asteroid belt at the edge of the system. It was not running in panic. It was drawing him away from his target. "This captain," Juan said slowly, "she thinks like a hunter, not prey." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain So Young watched the main Vorthak fleet begin to move. 40 massive bioships, each one larger than a city, were turning to follow her single vessel. "Captain," said Communications Officer Yunji, "we're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet." "Put it through." The main screen shimmered and showed Juan standing in what looked like the inside of a living creature. The walls pulsed with veins, and strange organic lights cast moving shadows. "I am War Prime Juan of the 7th Consumption Fleet," the alien said. His voice was translated by the ship's computer, but something in his tone suggested surprise. "You have done something unexpected, human captain. My scouts are dead." So Young stood straight, her hands behind her back. "I am Captain So Young of the Terran defense ship Indomitable. Your scouts attacked first." "They were merely testing your defenses," Juan replied. "It is how we begin every conquest. The enemy shows us their weapons, we adapt to them, then we consume everything." He paused, studying her. "But you killed them before they could adapt. How?" "Trade secret," So Young said calmly. Juan made a sound that might have been laughter. "I offer you the same choice I have given 97 species before you. Surrender now and your death will be quick. Your world will be consumed, but you will not suffer. Fight us and you will watch your people die slowly as we adapt to everything you can throw at us." "Counter-offer," So Young replied. "Turn around and leave this system. Find somewhere else to be." Now Juan did laugh. "In 100 years of expansion, no species has ever made demands of the Vorthak. You intrigue me, Captain. I think I will study your corpse personally." The transmission ended. "Well," said Tactical Officer Hai-Jin, "that went better than expected." "Did it?" asked Weapons Officer Minho. "He's curious about us," So Young explained. "That means he's not thinking clearly." "Jin Woo, how many kinetic rounds do we have?" Chief Engineer Jin Woo checked his console. 64 uranium slugs for the railguns, plus about 300 smaller rounds for the point defense systems. "And energy weapons?" "Full charge on all systems, Captain." So Young nodded. "Nari, you said these bioships adapt to weapons during battle. How fast?" The Caltherian refugee, now serving as an unofficial advisor on the bridge, looked troubled. "Very fast. When my people first engaged them, our plasma cannons were effective for perhaps 10 minutes. Then the bioships changed, and the same weapons became useless. So we need to keep changing our tactics," Yejin said. "More than that," So Young said, watching the enemy fleet approach. "We need to be unpredictable." "Jinwoo, can you modify our energy weapons to fire in different frequencies?" "Yes, Captain, but it will take time between modifications. Then we'll buy time." So Young turned to her pilot. "Jiwon, take us into the asteroid field. Let's see how well those bioships handle an obstacle course." The Indomitable dove into the thick belt of asteroids that surrounded the system's outer edge. The ship twisted and turned between rocks the size of buildings, some of them rich in metals that would interfere with sensors. Behind them, the Vorthak fleet followed, but their massive bioships were not built for this kind of maneuvering. They had to go around the larger asteroids, giving the Indomitable precious time. "Contacts closing from behind," announced sensor operator Kyung-soo. 20 bioships have broken off from the main group. "They're trying to surround us." "Expected," So Young said. "Weapons, prepare to engage the lead ships. Use energy weapons first, then switch to kinetics when they adapt." The first Vorthak ship to catch up was a medium-sized bio-vessel, about the size of a destroyer. It fired some kind of organic projectile that splashed against the Indomitable's shields like acid. Return fire, plasma cannons full spread. The human ship's weapons lit up space with blue-white energy. The plasma bolts struck the bioship's hull, burning through its organic armor. The creature screamed, but it did not die. Instead, its hull began to change, growing thicker and taking on a different color. "Direct hit but minimal damage," Minho reported. "Their hull is already adapting to plasma. Switch to quantum torpedoes." The next salvo used a different type of energy weapon. The quantum torpedoes phased through normal matter before exploding inside the bioship's hull. This time, the damage was severe. The bioship's scream cut off suddenly. "Target destroyed," Heejin announced. "But Captain, 2 more ships are approaching and they're already showing resistance to quantum weapons." "They communicate with each other," Nari said. "When one ship learns to resist a weapon, the knowledge spreads to the others." So Young nodded grimly. "Railguns, target the closest ship." The Indomitable fired another uranium slug. The bioship, having not yet encountered this type of weapon, took the full impact. The 2-ton projectile punched completely through its hull and out the other side. The ship died instantly. "They can't adapt to what they don't understand," So Young muttered. "But they're learning. Look." On the tactical display, the approaching bioships were changing course, no longer flying in straight lines. They were trying to make themselves harder targets for kinetic weapons. "Smart," admitted Hyejin. "They're adapting their tactics, not just their armor." "Then we adapt faster," So Young said. She opened a channel to the entire crew. "All hands, this is the captain. We are facing an enemy that learns from every attack we make. Our advantage is that humans have always been good at changing plans. Engineering, I want you to modify our weapons between every engagement. Weapons, I want you to use different tactics with every attack. Pilots, fly like each enemy ship is different from the last one." "Captain," Yoonji called out, "I'm picking up communications between the bioships. It's some kind of organic transmission, like they're sharing information through their nervous systems. Can you disrupt it? Maybe. If I can find the right frequency." Another bioship appeared from behind a large asteroid, firing organic projectiles. The Indomitable rolled to avoid the attack, then fired back with modified laser arrays. The beams cut through the bioship's hull, but within minutes the wound was healing. "They're adapting faster now," Minho warned. "That ship just developed immunity to our lasers. Photon batteries. Different frequency, different type of energy. The photon weapons were effective for exactly 7 minutes before the bioships adapted to them as well." "Captain, Jinwoo's voice came over the comm. "I finished modifying the plasma cannons. They're now firing at a completely different frequency than before." "Do it." The modified plasma weapons caught the bioships by surprise. 2 more ships died before the rest could adapt. But Juan was learning too. On his flagship, he studied the tactical reports with growing interest. "These humans," he said to his sub-commanders, "they do not use their weapons the same way twice. Each attack is different. It is inefficient, War Prime. They are wasting time and energy." "No," Juan said slowly. "They are teaching us that efficiency is not the same thing as effectiveness." He looked at the display showing the running battle in the asteroid field. "This Captain so young, she is showing me something I have not seen in 100 years of conquest." "What is that, War Prime?" "That there might be more than one way to fight a war." The battle continued to rage among the asteroids, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. But both sides were learning, and the real test was yet to come. The darkness of space was broken by a sight that had made entire civilizations surrender. Without firing a single shot, the Vorthak fleet moved like a swarm of giant insects, but these were no ordinary ships. They were alive. Each vessel pulsed with organic light, their hulls shifting and changing as they traveled through the void. Juan stood in the heart of his flagship, the Devourer. The ship was not built in any factory or shipyard. It had grown from a seed, fed on the remains of conquered worlds and defeated fleets. The walls around him breathed slowly, and he could feel the ship's hunger through his connection to its nervous system. "War Prime," came a voice from one of the organic control nodes. "The target system is ahead. 3 planets, 2 billion inhabitants total." Juan nodded. Another easy meal for his fleet. In the past year, they had consumed 47 worlds. Each victory made the fleet stronger. The bioships learned from every battle, adapting to new weapons and growing more powerful. "Have any of them ever resisted?" Juan asked. "A few tried, War Prime. The Caltherians fought for 6 hours before we adapted to their plasma weapons. The Zentak managed 8 hours with their gravity bombs. None lasted a full day." Juan smiled. The pattern was always the same. The enemy would use their best weapons. The bioships would take damage at first, then quickly develop immunity. Within hours, the same weapons that had hurt them became useless. The fleet would then consume everything, growing larger and stronger. On the human colony world of New Busan, alarms were screaming. Nari ran through the corridors of the refugee center, her blue skin marking her as one of the few Caltherian survivors in human space. She had seen what the Vorthak could do. She had watched her homeworld die. "Please, you must listen to me," she shouted at the human soldiers. "Their ships are not like anything you have seen before. They eat your weapons, learn from them, become immune to them." A tall human officer looked at her with tired eyes. "Ma'am, we appreciate the warning, but we have our orders. The colony must be defended." Nari grabbed his arm. "You don't understand. They are not just ships. They are living things. When you shoot them, they feel pain. But then they change so the same pain never hurts them again. My people had the most advanced plasma technology in the sector. It meant nothing." The officer, whose name tag read Tae-ho, looked at the tactical display. 43 bioships were approaching the system. The colony's defense force had 12 patrol boats and 1 aging cruiser. The main Earth fleet was 3 weeks away. "What about the Indomitable?" Tae-ho asked his aide. "Still in the outer system, sir. Captain So Young reports they are ready for combat, but it's just 1 ship against their entire fleet." Tae-ho looked at Nari again. "These bioships, do they have any weaknesses?" Nari's eyes were full of pain. "If they do, my people never found them. The Vorthak have been doing this for a very long time. They came from the galactic core, running from something even worse than they are. They consume worlds to feed their fleet, to make it strong enough to keep running." On the Indomitable, Captain So Young stood on the bridge, watching the enemy fleet approach. Her ship was new, an experimental heavy cruiser loaded with the latest human technology. But she had heard the reports from the other sectors. The Vorthak seemed unstoppable. "Captain," said her weapons officer, Minho, "we're getting some strange readings from their ships. They look organic, like they're made of living tissue." "I've heard the stories," So Young replied. "They adapt to whatever weapons we use against them." "Jin Woo, what do we have that might surprise them?" Chief Engineer Jin Woo looked up from his console. "Well, Captain, this ship was built for testing different weapon systems. We have the new quantum torpedoes, photon batteries, plasma cannons. But we also have some older systems. Railguns loaded with uranium slugs originally meant for asteroid mining. Primitive kinetic weapons? Asked Tactical Officer Heejin. Against ships that advanced? Sometimes old methods work when new ones fail, So Young said. Prepare all weapon systems. We're going to give them everything we have. The Vorthak fleet slowed as they reached the edge of the system. Juan studied the tactical display with interest. Most species would either flee or gather their forces in one place for a desperate last stand. But the humans had spread their ships out in a loose formation around the colony world. Interesting, Juan muttered. They are not following standard defensive patterns. Perhaps they are simply inexperienced, War Prime, suggested one of his sub-commanders. Perhaps. Or perhaps they think differently than our previous enemies. Juan had learned not to underestimate new species, even if they seemed weak. Send the scouts forward. Let us see what weapons they use. 6 Vorthak bioships moved ahead of the main fleet. They were smaller than the capital ships, but still larger than the human patrol boats. As they approached New Busan, the human ships opened fire. The space around the bioships lit up with energy weapons. Plasma bolts, laser beams, and particle streams struck their living hulls. The bioships screamed in the vacuum, their pain transmitted through the Vorthak fleet's organic communication network. But within minutes, their hulls began to change. The damaged tissue regrew, but now it was different. The same weapons that had hurt them before now harmlessly bounced off their modified armor. Juan nodded with satisfaction. The pattern was repeating itself. Soon all human energy weapons would be useless and the feast could begin. That was when the Indomitable appeared from behind one of the system's moons. New contact, War Prime. 1 large human vessel. Let it come, Juan said. 1 ship cannot change the outcome. Captain So Young watched the tactical display as her ship approached the Vorthak scouts. She could see that their hulls had already adapted to the energy weapons used by the patrol boats. Jinwoo, are the railguns ready? She asked. Yes, Captain. Loaded with depleted uranium slugs, each one weighing 2 tons and moving at 15% of light speed. Fire. The Indomitable shuddered as 6 railguns fired simultaneously. The uranium slugs crossed the distance to the bioships in seconds. There was no energy signature for the bioships to adapt to. No exotic particles to learn from. Just simple, fast-moving chunks of metal. The first slug punched through a bioship's hull like it was made of paper. The ship convulsed and died instantly. The second slug hit another ship in what looked like its brain center. That ship also died. In the span of 5 seconds, half of the Vorthak scouts were destroyed by weapons that should have been obsolete thousands of years ago. For the first time in over a century of conquest, War Prime Juan felt something he had almost forgotten: fear. The Indomitable raced toward Juan's flagship, its reactor building toward a carefully controlled overload. In the ship's engine room, Chief Engineer Jinwoo made final adjustments to the modified reactor core. Captain, he reported over the comm, the reactor is configured to appear as a new type of energy weapon. To their sensors, it will look like we're charging up some kind of super beam. Will they try to adapt to it? Captain So Young asked. If their behavior follows the pattern we've observed, yes. They should attempt to absorb and counter the energy signature. On the bridge, the crew watched as the distance to the Vorthak flagship decreased rapidly. 500 kilometers, 400, 300. Captain, Communications Officer Yunji said quietly, I'm receiving a transmission from the Vorthak flagship. Put it through. Juan appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the organic walls of his ship pulsed with increasing urgency. Captain So Young, he said, my sensors indicate you are preparing to ram my ship with some kind of energy weapon. This is your final attack? It is, So Young replied. We've shown you everything we have. This is what humans do when we're cornered. You fight until the end, regardless of the cost. That's right. Juan was quiet for a moment. In 112 years of conquest, no species has ever forced us to adapt this many times in a single battle. No enemy has ever lasted 12 hours against our fleet. Is there a point to this conversation? So Young asked. The distance was now down to 100 kilometers. Yes, Juan said. Captain, what are you running from? So Young blinked in surprise. What? Every species we have conquered was running from something. The Caltherians were fleeing economic collapse. The Zentak were escaping a plague. The Horthak were trying to find new resources as their star died. Juan leaned forward. What disaster is humanity trying to escape? We're not running from anything, So Young said, confused. This is our home system. We're defending it. For the first time since the battle began, Juan looked genuinely shocked. You are defending? Not fleeing? Of course we're defending. This is where we live, but why would you fight so hard for one small colony world? Why not evacuate and find another planet? So Young stared at the alien commander. Because it's ours. Because people are living there. Because that's what humans do. We protect what matters to us. On the Vorthak flagship, something unprecedented happened. Juan felt doubt. For over a century, the Vorthak had consumed world after world, always encountering species that were running from some catastrophe. Races that had lost their homeworlds and were searching for new ones. Civilizations fleeing disasters or seeking resources. But humans were different. They weren't refugees or explorers or desperate survivors. They were simply defending their home. War Prime, his tactical officer called out. The human ship is within absorption range. Shall we prepare to counter their energy weapon? Juan looked at the display showing the approaching human ship. Inside that vessel was a crew that had fought with more creativity and determination than he had ever encountered. They had shown him tactics he had never imagined, weapons he had never seen, and a way of thinking that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. And they were about to die defending a single small world that they could easily abandon. War Prime, the tactical officer repeated. Stand down, Juan ordered. Sir, I said stand down. Do not attempt to adapt to their weapon. Aboard the Indomitable, So Young watched in amazement as the Vorthak bioships suddenly stopped their defensive preparations. The massive flagship directly ahead made no attempt to avoid the collision or counter the approaching energy signature. Captain, Jinwoo's voice came over the comm. The reactor is at critical. We need to either detonate now or shut it down. So Young looked at the screen where Juan still waited. Why? She asked him. Because you have shown me something I thought was impossible, Juan replied. A species that fights not because they are desperate, but because they choose to fight. A people who adapt not through biological evolution, but through thought and creativity. I still don't understand. Captain, the Vorthak are running. We have been running for 300 years, consuming worlds to make our fleet strong enough to keep ahead of our pursuers. We thought that was the only way to survive, to become stronger by taking from others. Juan paused, looking directly at her. But you have shown me that there might be another way. Instead of running and consuming, perhaps we could stand and defend. Instead of adapting only our biology, perhaps we could adapt our thinking. Who are you running from? So Young asked. The Devourers, Juan said, and his voice carried fear. They come from the galactic core. They consume not just matter and energy, but space itself. Where they pass, nothing can ever exist again. So Young felt a chill. How long until they reach this sector? Perhaps 50 of your years. Perhaps less. Juan straightened. Captain, I make you an offer. Instead of destroying each other, let us learn from each other. Your people's adaptability combined with our biological enhancement technology. You want an alliance? So Young said in disbelief. I want to learn how to fight like a human, Juan replied. And perhaps in exchange we can teach you how to make your ships grow stronger instead of weaker in battle. Jinwoo, So Young called out. Shut down the reactor overload. Aye, Captain. Reactor powering down. The Indomitable slowed to a stop just a few kilometers from the massive Vorthak flagship. For the first time in over a century, a Vorthak fleet had ended a battle without consuming anything. Captain, Tactical Officer Hyojin said quietly, we just made first contact with an alien species by nearly blowing them up. Strangest diplomatic meeting in human history, agreed Weapons Officer Minho. Over the next few hours, as both fleets remained in a tense but peaceful standoff, So Young and Juan began the delicate process of negotiation. It was complicated by the fact that both sides had been trying to kill each other just minutes before. The first thing we need, So Young said during one of their communications, is proof that you're serious about this alliance. Your fleet has been attacking human colonies. My orders were to consume all resistance in this sector, Juan replied. But I am War Prime. I can change those orders. And what about the rest of your people? Will they accept an alliance with a species they were trying to conquer? Juan considered this. When I return to the fleet command and tell them about human adaptability, about how you fought us to a standstill with inferior numbers and technology, I think they will be very interested in learning from you. There's another problem, So Young said. My government will need to know that humanity can trust the Vorthak. How do we know you won't just learn from us and then turn on us later? Because, Juan said, the Devourers cannot be defeated by any single species. If we are to have any hope of survival, we need to combine our strengths. Vorthak biological adaptation with human creative thinking. Biological adaptation? So Young mused. You mean you could make our ships heal themselves and grow stronger? Among other things, yes. And you could teach us to think beyond the patterns we have always followed. So Young looked around her damaged bridge at her exhausted crew. They had fought the impossible battle and somehow survived it. Now they were being offered something even more impossible, a chance to turn their greatest enemy into their strongest ally. I'll need to speak with Earth. Command, she said finally, and I will need to convince the other war primes. Juan replied. This is going to be complicated, So Young said. Captain, Juan said, and she could hear something like humor in his voice. After fighting humans for 12 hours, I believe I am prepared for complicated. 6 months later, the first joint human Vorthak research station was established in the neutral zone between their territories. Captain So Young, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the station alongside War Prime Juan. The early days were difficult. Humans had trouble trusting beings who had been trying to consume them. Vorthak had trouble understanding beings who fought for principles rather than survival. But slowly, both species began to learn from each other. Human ships were redesigned with bioorganic components that could heal damage and adapt to new threats. Vorthak vessels were equipped with human-designed systems that could change tactics unpredictably. More importantly, both species learned new ways of thinking. Humans discovered the value of biological adaptation and long-term planning. Vorthak learned about creativity, improvisation, and fighting for something beyond mere survival. When the first scouts of the Devourer fleet finally arrived at the edge of human space 47 years later, they found something they had never encountered before. Two species that had combined their strengths rather than competing for resources. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations across the galaxy, but they had never faced the combined adaptability of the Vorthak and the creative stubbornness of humanity. For the first time in eons, the Devourers encountered resistance they could not simply overwhelm. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time in 300 years, the Vorthak were not running, they were ready to make a stand.